was drinking blood. It just kept growing inside the heart, getting bigger and bigger, and making it smaller. So once it got to a certain pressure, they said, we don't want it to build enough pressure in there to damage the valves. So when he was 5, when he was drinking blood, it just kept 6. 5 years later, they had to go in and cut it out again. And now and cut that out, and he said it's grown and puts on the valves. Probably gonna have to do 2 valves, like aortic valve, pulmonary valve.
How's that?
That's good.
Welcome, everybody. Let's begin this work session, and I'm actually very excited about it. So I don't see any other things. I'm just going to turn this over to Gary, our city attorney, and
Well, thank you.
enlighten us.
Thank you. Oh, boy. That's a tall order. I know these guys. So it's good to be here. And I realize you're here because the law mandates you be here, and I promised you a steak dinner. But other than that, we look forward to just maybe just discussing some of the stuff that you have to know that ought to be important. That changes every year up at the legislature, which is really frustrating. This year, there are a number of changes to even what I'm telling you tonight. So we'll try to keep you abreast. That's the reason they have you come in every year, is because they change the rules every year, right? And that's their prerogative. So now you do have a gavel.
I don't want you to get to the slide in the training that says all meetings must be conducted with a gavel.
Do it over.
Noise ordinance.
Gavel's essential, absolutely essential. The 3 subjects that I'm supposed to just talk to you a little bit about are you've got conflicts of interest, you've got open meetings, and you got sexual harassment. And so this is like a fire hose, because any one of those subjects, I've seen classes and taught classes that are up to 4 hours long on any one of the subjects. So this will be a very, very quick download for you. Let me start by giving you a video, showing you a video that has a really good summary of conflicts of interest and of the ethics portion of what I'm going to be talking to you about tonight. It's put on by a group called the League of Cities and Towns, and some of you are familiar with them. And several years ago, President Niederhauser from the Senate, actually authorized the expenditure of funds for a series of trainings called Luau, land use something. Anyway, if you look it up, League of Cities and Towns Luau, you've got a ton of presentations on there that deal with conditional uses, subdivisions, master plans, zoning, all those issues. There's just short, brief, like 6 to 8 minute presentations on each one of those. And they're good primers, even for me. I learned something just by watching Meg on this 6-minute video that you're going to watch in a second ago. I did not realize that there were exceptions to recusing yourself when you're in a meeting, even though you feel that there may be a conflict. There's an exception to that. And I didn't know that. I learned something new. So watch for that in this video. Let's give you the video if we can find it here. Okay, let's see. Desktop. Where did it go? Time. Let's see.
Let's watch
there it
the
is.
Hawaii.
Yeah. There it is. Okay.
Talking luau, huh?
Let's turn it up. Do I have to turn mine up?
Welcome to the Land Use Academy of Utah. I'm Meg Ryan with the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and today we're going to talk about the Ethics Act under the Utah state law. In the public sector, we've traded efficiency for transparency. What do I mean by that? Well, we are doing the public's business in public. And in Utah, we have a lot of rules and regulations that detail how we must do our work. These 4 basic laws inform your conduct, your meeting and procedures, what records you need to keep, and how the public can access them. Today, I'm going to review what the state requires, where you can find the regulations, and the resources you have to figure out how to comply with them. You get to do all the heavy lifting. And please remember, consult your own attorney after you look at these rules and regulations and check your own local code for compliance. All right, the Fantastic Four. These are all required by the state of Utah, and you can find them all on the great state website, le.utah.gov. All right, the first of the mighty four. This is Title 10, Chapter 3 of the Utah State Code. This deals with rules and procedures. This is the how of how you're going to do it. Number 2 is Title 52, Chapter 4. This is the Open and Public Meetings Act, OPMA. We certainly love acronyms in the planning field, but this is the process of how we are going to conduct the public's business in public and transparency. Number 3 is GRAMA. No, not your grandma in the rocking chair. This is the Government Records Access and Management Act, Title 63G, Chapter 2. This is how we learn how the public can access information. And finally, the subject of today, the Ethics Act. Where do we find it? Title 10, Chapter 3, Part 13 of the Utah State Code. And here's the official title, the Municipal Officers and Employees Ethics Act. Phew, I can never say that. That's why we like to call it the Ethics Act. As you can see, there are detailed components to this statute, and you should read it all. But here are the top 5 things that we want you to know. Number 1, you must disclose your interests with the city, town, or county. What does that mean? Well, this is talking about financial disclosure. This means that you have to submit a form to the city that talks about what your interests are in town. Everyone may know them already, but this is the legal document that shows what operations you may own or what businesses or what interests you have in town. Not if you play the flute, but financial disclosure. There is no annual update to this form, but be sure that after you amass that large fortune that you update these forms so that everyone knows. And again, remember, we're doing the public's business in public. Number 2, you cannot accept a gift over $50. We like to recommend that you keep a receipt or notation of any transaction if you do choose to accept these. Number 3, conflict of interest. There are 2 aspects to this provision, the financial and political. So let me give you an example. In the financial arena, this is what the state law requires. Let's say you're a planning commissioner and you're sitting up on the dais, and on that agenda that evening, there's an ordinance that's going to, let's say, repeal all laundromats in town. Well, guess what? You happen to own that laundromat. So the item comes up on the agenda, and this is what the law requires. You, the planning commissioner, needs to say, "Hi, I'm Joe, and I own the laundromat in town. And I think this is the best ordinance you have ever considered." And then you put your hand down. Okay, trick question. Does that satisfy state law? What do you do then? Can you go ahead and vote? Yes, you can. You've disclosed your financial interest, and that's what's required under the state law. You can go ahead and vote. Let me add a little nuance, because as you know, in politics, there's always nuances. If there is not a quorum and you have decided not to vote, that's your own political compass. That's the second part of this. You can say, I've disclosed and I choose not to vote. I'm going to recuse myself from the discussion. If you've decided to do that, then the chair could make you vote if there isn't a quorum. So in other words, you can't use that disclosure and removal from the situation to not have a quorum. So again, let's review that. Financial disclosure, then you can vote. It's your own political compass and your own moral compass if you decide that you can't take a vote on that action. Number 4, ex parte communication. This is a nice Latin word meaning away from or outside of. Look to your own local codes for any guidance on this. This area deals with how you may or may not communicate with the public or applicants outside of the public meeting. Let me give you an example. You're in a small town or even maybe a large town. You go to the grocery store, you're on the planning commission and you're trying to get your milk. 3 members of the public come up to you and they say, "Hey, I heard that guy Joe's expanding his garage and boy, do we want to tell you how we feel." So here's an example of how you might handle that situation. Unless there's something in your own local code that directs you on how to deal with that, you can either decide to take their input, and then we recommend that you relay that back to your commission or council the next time you're meeting. Or you could say, "Hey, I really want to hear what you guys said, but I'm one member of a larger group. Come to our meeting. It's next Tuesday night at 6 at City Hall, and let us all hear what your grievances are." So again, the choice is up to you on how you deal with this, unless your local code directs otherwise. So what happens if a complaint is filed with you or staff? Well, Under state law, there is a municipal ethics review commission that was set up to deal with this. Under the Ethics Act, you can either decide to set up your own commission locally by ordinance by the legislative body, the city council, or you can just default to the state's commission, and they have the review and process of how they deal with an ethics complaint. Well, that was our quick summary. That was the first of the Fantastic Four, the Ethics Act. Remember, please consult with your own local attorney on any specifics of this act and tune in to the other 3 videos that deal with the Fantastic Four. Thank you for all you do, and we appreciate you tuning in to the Land Use Academy of Utah. Until next time.
So what we can do is we can actually get this, we can get this material to you. Denise will put it online and you can actually access it. Each one of those subjects that she discussed, she's got a full video on it, about 8 minutes long on each one of them. And they're very, very useful. They kind of lay out things that you don't think about. And the one aspect of that I didn't know about, and I've been in the practice for 30 years, or forgot about, I've forgotten more than I really ever remember, is the piece where you can't exclude yourself if you don't have a quorum, even though you want to, and you may think you need to. You can't do that. Didn't realize that. So there are little nuances in the law all the time that they're raising. Conflicts of interest, any question on conflicts? I think she gave a good summary. All you have to do in the state of Utah is if you've got a pecuniary interest in something that the city is dealing with, or in something, a contract that the city's entering into with somebody, or if you own a business in town that the city regulates, or if you happen to have a partner, or your children happen to be in partnership, your son happens to be in partnership in a real estate company that is actually doing business, that maybe they're coming in for applications for subdivision approval or something of that nature. All you need to do in the state of Utah, if you've got a pecuniary interest, is you need to declare it. We're a declaring state. We're not a prohibition state. There's no fine, there's no penalty for not declaring it. But when it comes time for litigating something, if you have a bias, the other side is going to discover that bias. And if you have a direct conflict of interest, the other side of that is, or the other side is going to use that against you in any type of litigation that they bring against the city for taking improper action, or being the individuals involved having a personal interest in the subdivision or in the item that's being discussed.
So if I was buying a lot in a subdivision that was up for approval, probably a conflict of interest.
That would, what do you think? Yeah. Is it pecuniary? Does it involve money? Yeah, it does, right? If this subdivision is approved, then you're able to build your home, and you've made an investment, maybe a down payment. If not a down payment, you'll be buying a lot in that subdivision. So that would be a conflict.
Gary, are those considerations of conflict financial only, or does it include others, i.e. family and so forth?
So primarily financial only.
Okay.
But interestingly enough, I had a mayor that used to go into restaurants, and when he introduced himself as the mayor, they'd always give him a seat, in the restaurant, and always give him the advantage. And even if everybody was stacked up in line, the mayor would always get a seat. Finally, he just told him, I really can't do this, because this is actually something you're doing because of what I am or who I am. And so I can't accept that. That was his own moral compass. That's what Meg was talking about. But at the same time, you're not to take any advantage as a result of your position. That's the bottom line. And especially not a pecuniary advantage. Now, it doesn't just extend to you, it extends to your family members as well. So if you got family members that are involved in businesses, or have an association, or their work happens to depend on whether or not you make a decision this night, whether or not they're going to be employed in Jeff's family, whether or not he's going to be able to employ his family to be able to fix a road that is in Morgan City. Jeff often has to look at it and say, do I need to exclude myself? I've had Eric also had to declare a conflict of interest because he went to the dark side and became a developer for a little while. And actually subdivided a large parcel of land, and he had to exclude himself.
Yep.
And when we say exclude, it helps to step down and step out. And the reason for the stepping out is because, you know what, when you're sitting in the back of the room and all your friends are trying to make a decision on something, it's really tough to say no when you're sitting right there. So it's good to exclude yourself from the room as well. Any questions on conflicts? We'll move on to the next
One
slide.
clarifying point. I'm in real estate, so I'm interested naturally in every single development.
Sure.
But I'm not specifically tied to, okay, this development's coming, I'm gonna buy that lot and build my house. I just naturally have that interest, and I would love to be able to get land and have a builder build it and help people move in, right? So I disclose that to the mayor on the form. But is that something like, I feel like that would be obnoxious for me to be like, hey, I'm a realtor, I'm obviously interested in your development of subdivision.
The planning commission and realtor will miss you because you'll never be president of the planning commission. We honestly will miss you. It's true. And, you know, we've got you in the positions you're in because you've got expertise in those areas. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a pecuniary interest in everything that goes on in the city. And a direct pecuniary interest is the most obvious, right? Where you're selling something to the city or actually getting a subdivision approved by the city, it's yours. That's.
Will you just clarify your comment on Will Michigan?
He's looking at a way out.
I just.
I should.
I wish you
terribly.
terribly.
So I am really sorry. You just lost a planning commission.
So Gary, let me get that through my head. It's not, he's in real estate, but if that subdivision's approved and moving forward, then he's okay to buy it after that, correct? You just
Correct.
can't purchase it before it's approved on a future motion.
Yeah. The interesting thing is it really comes down to this. Do you feel that by voting on this issue that you would have a bias? Once you've declared, you've met the law, right? Now you need to decide whether or not your moral compass says you have a bias on this. And if you're gonna have a bias on it, especially when it's related to money, it's the most obvious bias. But if it's just because, you know, you happen to like convenience stores and you need one in the city or something like that, those types of things are just, you know, they probably don't have any consequence. Secondary consequences probably are not going to cause you to step down. Does that make sense? Kind of. Yes.
But it really does have a lot to do with the optics. I mean, how
Very
does it,
good.
how does it look?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. For example, I guess in my time on the city council, my brother Rick was a city attorney for a while. We had some discussion concerning the city attorney. I wasn't here. I scooted out the door there because, you know, it was involving my brother. So my experience, it really is optics, and it is this moral compass. How do you feel about it? What is your gut? Yeah.
And so the rule of thumb is avoid the very appearance. That's the best I can give you. So, okay, let's move on to the next item. The next item is, I can find my here. We've got conflicts of interest. We've got open meetings. Let's talk a little bit about open meetings because that's, and she talked a little bit about it. Involved in that is, I'm going to call a thing called ex parte communications. Can we talk about that just for a second? What she talked about just a minute ago. So who does the planning commission represent? Planning commission represents the code. Very good. Planning commission represents the code. You don't represent the citizens of Morgan. You represent the code and you defend the code, you apply the code, and you create the code sometimes by recommendation of the city council. You don't pass the final action on the code. But you are an administrative body that sometimes approves, give final approval to administrative matters like subdivisions and conditional uses, those types of things. You're that type of body. Your whole purpose in life is to defend that code and to make sure it's followed. So what does that say about ex parte communications for planning commissions? Those are the situations where it probably is not good to have ex parte communication with individuals, either the developers outside of planning commission or the public outside of the planning commission. And I'd strongly recommend against doing that. Meg gave two options, one being if you do happen to be, sometimes you're not going to get out behind the back row at church fast enough, right? Because everybody's looking for you because they know that you're going to approve this multifamily unit that is coming in right next to their neighborhood and they want to corner you on it. Well, you're not going to get away from them. Sometimes you're just there. And the best option there would be to make sure that whatever you're told when you're in that position, you come back and you tell the body what you've been told. I met with a bunch of people on Sunday and they were really angry at this. I heard about their concerns about traffic. I heard about this, that, and the other. The other option is just simply to say, hey guys, the best option for you is to come to the meeting. Make sure all of us hear that. Because, you know, I'm just one member of the planning commission, but all of us need to hear what you've got to say. City council is a little bit different in that they're elected to listen to people. And if they say, I can't listen to you, they're not gonna want probably one term is all you'll, maybe one term. Okay. Because if their garbage doesn't get emptied, the city council has to listen to them, right? So city council will listen to them, but at the same time, the same standard applies to you. If you hear something outside of a public meeting on something you're making a determination on, it ought to come back to this body through you. You indicate that this is what happened. The other answer is also appropriate, which is, you know what, there's 6 members of the city council. They all ought to have the opportunity of hearing what you got to say. And so that's important. Open meetings, let's talk about that because it kind of winds into open meetings, right? So what happens if Tony decides that during the course of a hearing that he wants the opinion before he votes on this issue of Eric and David? And so he gets on his cell phone, he's texting, how do you really feel about this? How are you going to vote? Appropriate violation of the open meetings, or are you okay?
Violation.
Okay, very good.
I'm gonna run for a state representative.
Well, we don't support that.
Sorry.
They, interestingly enough, they close
I'll
meetings
give you
for
one of these for 2 of those. Sorry.
closed meeting for politicians up on the hill. It cracks me up.
Yeah.
We're going into caucus. Oh, how can you go into caucus? My council can't go into caucus, except for what? Limited reasons, right? Pending litigation, sale of real estate, sale or lease of real estate, and talking about the professional employment situation of an individual. So, and their answer is what? Do you know why the state can go into those closed meetings? Is because they're no longer legislators when they walk into those meetings. They're Republicans, all right? Literally, it is a Republican caucus is what it is. Because the Democrats don't attend the Republican caucus up there. So how do you get around the Open Meetings Act? You call it a Republican caucus. Now, if these guys wanted to do that, they could, if they were all Republicans.
They're all nonpartisan.
We could close it. We could go into a closed session to discuss political issues for the Republican Party. That's essentially that's how they get around it up there. But nonetheless, you can only hold closed meetings for a certain number of things, and you can't, as a planning commission, ever hold a closed meeting. It's city council that can hold those closed meetings. The only other board that can hold a closed meeting is if a board is ever convened, for example, on an appeal that you have. They can actually go back and deliberate, but right now we use a hearing officer for any appeals from administrative decisions that you make as a planning commission. If you approve a subdivision, we would hire a hearing officer. Haven't ever had to do that because you're so good at making the decisions you make that nobody ever appeals your decision. But every once in a while, you'll have the decisions that actually by code go to the council, and we'll hear it again up there, right? And so they do act as an appeal body sometimes, but most of the time they act as a legislative body, approving what you recommend. Hopefully approving what you recommend. If they don't, they'll discuss it with you, let you know why they don't approve that. So meetings have to be, if I invite you over to my place for a party, for a meal, if Ty says steaks for everyone as a result of having to listen to the lawyer all evening long, that's a tough go. Everybody come over to my place and we'll have steaks.
Is that all?
Is that it? That's all it takes, right?
Okay.
Just feed 'em. But the
Sweet
bottom line
deal.
is that a meeting?
Yes.
When he invites you guys over?
There's more than two.
So, yeah, there's more than two, right? You need how many on this council? 2, 3? How many do you need on your planning commission? 4. There you go. Because you got what, 7, right? 7 members? On the council, this is a 6-member council form of government. And there are 6 members of a council here. They all have legislative and administrative powers. And they use them differently. They put on different hats, at different times. The administrative powers are whenever they make the final approval on a subdivision. For example, some of the subdivisions go to them, right? On a site plan, there are some site plans that go to them. That's when they act administratively. But for the most part, these guys make the laws and you guys enforce the laws. And so that's the form of government that they're in. However, the mayor can only vote on 2 occasions. You know what they are? Tie. You know what the second one is? The council makes the rules as to how the government runs because they make the laws, right? And so whenever they're changing the power of the mayor or the power of the city manager or the duties of the city manager, the mayor can vote on those 2 things, on the hiring of a city manager and the council, however, ties evaluations depend on how well he cooks that steak for at least 5 of the council members up here. And then the mayor tells him good or bad news. That's the way that it goes. So the ties boss is the council. That's the way that our form of government is organized. Okay, other issues regarding open meetings. I know this year they're trying to make they're both meetings and hearings, right? Public hearings. During a public meeting, do you have to let everybody talk? In a public meeting? No? No, you don't. Public meeting is just that. And under state law, I'm going to give you an example where you guys kind of do a little bit excess, but I think you have 2 hearings for subdivision approval, don't you? Typically. But state law only requires 1 hearing, 1 public hearing for subdivision approval, unless you want to change it and become more restrictive and have 2. The second one only has to be, the second time it's heard before the city council, for example, it only has to be a public meeting. So you only need to listen to people when it's a public hearing. You don't have to listen to people when it's a public meeting. All right, you have no obligation to do that. Can you do it electronically? Yes, you've done that. We've all learned about electronically running meetings. They're going to tighten that up a little bit this year too, because some of those electronic meetings, they don't really know how the guy on the phone or the gal on the phone voted. And so they want to tighten that up a little bit to make sure that they do a voice vote whenever you have an electronic meeting. Okay, anything else? Let me think. Denise, anything else you want to discuss with them? Okay. She's my expert. I always go to the recorder because they know everything about public meetings. Can somebody record your meetings? Your public meetings? Sure.
Stop.
Yeah, you can't stop them. They can record it. What are the official meeting minutes of your meeting? Are they the verbal things that you say, or are they the written copy of the minutes? Which is the official? If we go to court, what are the official minutes of the meeting?
We accept the written
Ones that
ones.
are-
Yep, exactly right. The printed, the ones that are approved, right?
Mhm.
What you approve in writing becomes the minutes of the meeting.
It's not what you say, it's what Denise said you said.
I'm always like that. Because after I look at it and I say, can you change this? No.
That's not what I meant.
Yeah.
Denise, come on now.
So Gary, it wouldn't be the recorded part of it.
Yeah, the recorded part is not the official minutes of the meeting.
Dictation.
That's,
Even
although
though
she
it's
does
clear,
keep
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
How long do we keep them, Denise? 3 years? And that helps us because 4 years is the period of time for litigation on any of these issues. So that's the reason we keep those, is because we often want to go back and see what you really said. Or make sure that what you really said is what you really meant. So.
So if you're in a public meeting and you see people in a meeting doing this, perfectly okay.
Perfectly okay. Yep, they can do that. They can do that. However, the interesting thing is I have been in court cases where somebody came in and said, well, I want to submit these as the official minutes of the meeting. I recorded what they said. And I've seen the judge say, no, what they said, what was in those is what was in those official minutes, in the written minutes and what you approved. And the reason the courts give is because they say that oftentimes even what is said is not what was actually meant. And so you have the opportunity of going over it and saying, well, that came out wrong, you know, and being able to adjust it. Now, if you adjusted it way after the fact, we'd all be suspicious. That's the reason minutes are approved at the next regular meeting, or as soon as possible. As soon as possible, they're to be approved. Any other questions on open meetings?
But the public can request the recorded copy.
Yes, within 72 hours. Is it?
Yes.
So the public can come in and say, can I get a recorded copy? And Denise has to produce that for them within, I think it's 72 hours.
Usually the day after I've uploaded.
She's great. She's very
It's out
efficient.
there.
Okay, the last item, sexual harassment. Boy, where do you start on this one? I was reading an article in the Standard Examiner the other day, and they were actually citing women in the workplace because they had invited them to give their personal experiences of what had happened in the workplace. Did any of you read that? It was like about a week ago. Shocked at some of the things that were said. Some of the inferences, and you know, they weren't all sexually harassing, but many of them were canceling female employees in the way that they spoke to them. There was a culture of whenever we go into a room in a meeting and there's one female in there, one female executive in there, and all males. Would you take notes for me? You know, take notes for this meeting. Why is it the female that has to take the notes? It's because all the males think that she should be taking the notes. There's a culture essentially that we've developed over time of what we think females should and should not do. And that culture has to change. The reason it has to is because it's costing us a lot of money. Some of the biggest lawsuits that we fight, I think I've told you before, in the city are sexual harassment. And even bigger than sexual harassment are when you don't protect that person after they have filed a complaint and you get retribution. Those are even bigger. One case that we had out in, I think I told you about this last year, but in West Jordan, it was a police officer, a male police officer that was being harassed, which is peculiar, but it happens from time to time. They settled for $84,000 out of West Jordan. But guess what happened? They brought him back and he began to work, and they went after him for a felony of some sort. I can't even remember what the felony was. It didn't really matter because it was retribution for his reporting. And that case settled for $2 million. So he made $2,085,000 on that particular case. It's not unusual. There's another one I noticed last night on the news. If you remember, there was a teacher, right? Teacher? Yeah. Everybody see. I don't know if she's right or wrong. It really doesn't matter because some attorney will always take the case. And you know what? It's not too hard to prove if you got the type of thing that happened in that case coming forward. I'm not saying she'll win, but I'm saying she's got a pretty good case. What she had was she had some students that were being sexually harassed by a young man, right? And she reported to the school board, and the school board eventually transferred her to another school and then let her go after that, which is kind of interesting. Those are all bad signs. I don't care what the real facts were or where they're going to end up. They're going to cost somebody money in litigating the case. So 2 types of sexual harassment. The one that's it's fast disappearing is something for something or quid pro quo. But the worst one is that hostile environment. And when we create a hostile environment like that, and that's a very good indication of what a hostile environment is when you report something and that report is ignored. Got a question for you. This is kind of an odd question, off the wall question. So you see somebody come in and Teresa's sitting over here at the desk and the individual is a developer. Developers are like this. No, they're not, Eric, honestly. Comes in through the door and makes a comment about Teresa and the way she looks today, but it's a little bit of a lewd comment about the way she looks. And then goes and sit down. Do you, as a planning commissioner, have any responsibility for stopping that type of thing happening to Teresa? And this guy's not part of the city, right?
Officially or unofficially?
Officially or unofficially? You tell me.
I-
Is there a difference
obviously,
between the two?
I don't know. That's why I say I don't know officially, but unofficially, that's not appropriate.
Very good. Very good. Officially or unofficially, if you don't do something about it, you guys are in a position of responsibility in the city, and for you to observe something like that happens and ignore it will ultimately be, you'll be on the witness stand saying, were you not there when that happened? Did you not say anything or do anything? All of us have a responsibility to watch for that. And when it happens, we have a responsibility to report it. And when we report it, it needs to be handled very, very quickly. Because the faster you handle those situations, the lower the money that you'll give out at the end. The lower the cash settlement will be. Any questions on any of that stuff? I know it's been really, really quick. Happy to answer any questions for you.
The hostile environment, does that have to be sexual or lewd in nature?
So a hostile environment can also be bullying and that type of thing.
Okay.
Sarcasm.
Falls under the same criteria as we're talking about though, is
It
that
does.
correct? Okay.
Sexual harassment has its own category though. And sexual harassment does involve reference to the sex of the other person. It doesn't matter if it's male or female.
Okay.
Obviously, because of our West Jordan situation, it can involve males as well. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? That was a lot in a few minutes. We could talk about any one of them for quite a period of time and go over fun experiences. Oh, yes. So Denise has over here.
Conflict of interest forms.
Yeah, conflicts of interest forms. So if you need a conflict of interest form, take it tonight, fill it out. If you do business with the city or you're licensed by the city or have any pecuniary connection to the city, you might want to fill that out. Sorry, it's so quick, but if you want more information, go to Luau. Not the Luau. But go to Luau.
Not my luau.
It says Hawaii on the
Since I'm
screen.
cooking
right
steaks.
That's right. I did have Hawaii on the screen. I should
Yeah,
have
yeah.
shown you the pictures.
Steaks are now kebabs.
It just make you jealous, that's all. Any questions at all? Is it helpful or is it?
Well done.
Mandatory fund.
Yeah. Aside from being mandatory, was it helpful, I guess?
When in doubt, ask.
Thanks. I'll put a link on, I'll have Denise put a link online to the other jury topics.
It's just, how does it look? You know?
Get paid so much for what you do, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Oh, hey, before the planning commission, leaves, we have another agenda item. Yep.
Oh, okay, so that's
Yeah,
with
with the
them.
planning commission.
One more minute. We need to leave this.
No, there's one more thing.
I tell y'all to sit down, but I don't want to create a hostile environment.
You're bullying.
Could I excuse myself, I'm sorry, excuse myself for a jump rope
Competition, observation, yeah, absolutely.
Hey, let me introduce, this is Rachel Turt, Morgan County historian.
This,
Welcome, Rachel. This,
Okay. I kind of like being here because then I can see everybody, so hopefully maybe this will work. So I'm here to talk to you guys about the Morgan Historic District. Things are in motion with that. You may have citizens come and ask you questions. We want to make sure that you are informed about what it is and are able to maybe answer questions or just be more informed for yourself as well. So I just have a few little frequently asked questions on here and then some information about the historic district. So I'll give you a little bit of background about what happened last year and where we're at. In 2020, 2021, we had a CLG grant that we used to do first a reconnaissance level survey. That is done to kind of just take inventory of what is here in Morgan. The last time that was done was in the 80s, so it had been almost 40 years since it had been done. And so that needed to be updated. And we needed that updated so that we could decide what we wanted to do as far as preservation in the community. So there was about 600 properties that were surveyed at that time. We decided to sort of narrow that area down to create the historic district. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today, kind of explain like what is the historic district, how does it work? What are the benefits to not only the city, but property owners as well? So first off, the National Register of Historic Places is the official federal list of districts, site, buildings, structures, and objects significant in American history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture. So that's basically what it is. It's a list. It's just an inventory. You know, research has been done to see what the significance of these places are. The National Historic Registry was formed back in the 60s because you had people over here that were trying to do preservation in the public entity, people over here doing it in the private entity, local level, national level, state level. This is just a way to kind of gather all of that information into one location. And that's about what it is. It doesn't, it's just a list. They don't like track really like what's happening with properties, who owns the properties at any given point. It's just sort of there as an honor to sort of say this is a significantly historic place. So it is administered by the National Park Service. So we have applied for a National Historic District. So what that basically is instead of going building by building and nominating those to be put on the register, we just grab a region and say, we think there's enough historic properties in here to create a district. And that's what we did with that survey. We found that there was about 60% historic contributing buildings, which is what they want to see. They want to see that there's enough density within that to validate creating a historic district. So there are two categories of buildings within any historic district. You've got the buildings that are contributing to the historic district, and you have non-contributing buildings. And so not everything in a historic district is going to be historic, and that's okay. So what everybody really wants to know, and what a big misconception is with the National Register of Historic Places and having that, is people think, oh, if my building's put on that, it's now going to have all these like limitations of what I can do to it. That's 100% not the case. Like I said before, it's just a list, it's just a registry so that we can kind of keep track of historically significant places. So under the federal law, the listing of a property on the National Register places no restrictions on what a non-federal owner, so federal buildings and stuff like that have different rules, but what a non-federal owner may do with their property up to and including destruction. So there's no limitations put on what they can or can't do with the building, including if they decide to demolish it. In that case, if it's changed or demolished, eventually it'll just be removed from the registry. That's it. The only time that is, there is limitations put on is if you've applied for federal monies to help do improvements on the building. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But even with that, there are like timeframes. It's like a 5-year period that you aren't allowed to change or do anything with the property. Otherwise, that the tax credits or money that you receive to do that work would be asked back. There is a little bit of an importance to understand. So when we're talking about the historic registry, that's different than when we're talking about the city's historic district overlay zone, which that's something that the Planning Commission deals with a little bit when we have projects that come up. So there are some design guidelines and ordinances that do pertain to buildings that fall within that overlay zone. But that again is a separate entity, a separate issue from the historic district register. And again, those projects are reviewed by the Planning Commission, the City Planning Commission, and they receive recommendations given by the city planner and the Historical Society on what should be done with some of those projects. And we are actually currently, we've been working on updating those guidelines the ordinance, and then creating some guidelines to help people understand what that historic overlay zone, what you can and can't do within that area. I was kind of thinking about it earlier, and it's almost kind of like an HOA. Like you have certain rules within that area of what you can and can't do, because we're trying to create an aesthetic in that area. And so we want to make sure that people are doing things that are going to fall within that and help enhance the historic district and take away from it. Does anybody have any questions for me at this point, or we'll just keep going through?
Rachel, does the district have geographical boundaries?
Yes, and there's a link to the nomination on here, and there is a map that has that. Anybody who has property within the historic district would have received a letter about the meeting last week. So everybody is aware if their property falls within that. And you can always contact the Historical Society for if you want to know if your property is within that and what the status is of your property.
Rachel?
Yeah.
So I have a question. I'm a little confused here. So let's take our commercial street, for example.
Mhm.
It's an overlay zone. So on this red bullet point up here, it says that there isn't any restrictions up to, you could, what does it say? Including destruction.
Mhm.
Is that saying that if you bought a building over on Commercial Street right now, you could tear it down, or does that overlay protect it? How does that work?
The overlay is a little bit different, but with what can and can't be done over there. But I believe at this point, there is no limitations on that, as far as what the city ordinance is.
So I was always under the impression you couldn't tear it down, but you could tear it down.
But there are incentives put in place, and that's what we're going to talk about next, is why we want to, basically what this does, the historic district creates a situation where we have all carrot, no stick. There's only benefits for that you can utilize with it, and no ramifications or limitations put in place because of it, if that makes sense.
Rachel, if they decided to tear that down, is there a building that has to be put there that qualifies for the?
So if something was torn down, it would, and it was a contributing building, it would be removed from the registry. As far as if it was in the Commercial Street Historic District, whatever was replaced there would have to follow the ordinance for that, which again, there is some aesthetic design guidelines for buildings that are put in that area so that it fits within the space.
Happens on a permit has to abide by that. So if
Okay.
you're rehabbing a building, if you're doing a new building, then that follows our code, but that's not what makes the building either historic significant or not. It's just the look and feel.
The
aesthetics. Yeah, that's
So-
what our code is for is.
Okay, so I remember years ago being on the planning commission and this
Mhm.
subject came up where it was pretty strict, so that's sort of changed.
As
So there couldn't be like,
The design, the guidelines were very strict, but we had a different committee that would do all of the reviews. The guidelines really haven't changed much other than our interpretation and how it applies has been clarified. So
okay, so,
there's probably a lot of things that were out there that
well, I remember the 25th Street kind of updating the 25th Street in Ogden,
mhm.
that they could use modern methods to build the building, but then they had to make it look historical.
And that
The
would
outside.
be Ogden City's,
Right.
their ordinance.
But
that
our
they maybe
ordinance
have-
kind of said if they used wooden pegs, you use wooden pegs.
Yeah, no, it's not like that. And in fact, again, there's this misconception, like, we want to preserve what's historic. We don't want to change that, but we also don't want to create a false history. So we don't want to create something and say, oh, well, this is what it was, and create this false feeling of this is what it's always been like. We always, if you're building something new, it will look a certain, fit within that sort of look, but it also needs to stand out as being, this is a new building. It's not trying to create something and say, oh, this is old. It's like, this is new, but it fits within the design of Commercial Street. So it'll have a certain look.
So he tore down the building.
It's changed.
Mhm.
Subway has to have a old look to it. Obviously, Subway has certain standards they have to follow. Obviously, it wouldn't work. Is that what you're saying?
It would, they would need to follow, like, it needs to go up to the street. It needs to have like big windows. It needs to, those sorts of things. So it just needs to fit the aesthetic of Commercial Street. So,
Basically, you can have a new building that's not a historical building
Yeah.
that meets the historical code and all's well.
so, and again, that's really unique to that Commercial Street.
I think a lot
area.
of the misnomers or what Rachel's talking about are the things of the past that everybody's heard or understood or processes that they've been through. And that's why when she says it's all carrot and no stick, that's what we're really trying to do. And I appreciate working with her, is that we're doing this so that there are incentives, right? With this designation, it creates those opportunities for people that do want to restore, or a portion of the building is left that they want to preserve, or those sort of things. Now, because we've gone through this process, it allows them to get tax credits for doing so. And before, we were just kind of mentally the other way, where it's just like, just don't touch anything. And
Yeah.
that doesn't work either.
So
It's been healthy. It's been good.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits. So first off, this is for eligible buildings within a historic district. They are able to apply for either a federal or state tax credits based on what type of property. Typically, the federal tax credit is for commercial buildings. The state tax credit is for residential buildings. There is a slight overlay if you have something that kind of is both, that has residential use as well as commercial use. You can potentially apply for both, but you would only be able to use those tax credits for the portion of the building that relates to.
These property or income tax credits?
They're tax credits. So
Property tax credit or an income tax? credit?
there's a little sheet here. It probably will tell you exactly. Yeah, I do believe it's
Federal,
income.
how's that come into play? You don't do property tax.
So yeah, so there are rules, and that's what these sheets have is what qualifies in any project.
Federal income tax credit. Okay, bingo, there's one answer. The federal is an income because that's all they tax.
Yeah. So, but the tax credit project, which again is a separate entity from the historic register, it's also facilitated through National Park Service and through the State Historic Preservation Office, but it's its own thing. Again, it's not tied to the registry other than your building needs to be on the registry in order to qualify to apply for it. Any tax credit project must apply with the State Historic Preservation Office before any work is started. That's just in case anybody comes and asks you guys about it. Say, if this is something you're interested in, you need to contact that Historic Preservation Office before you get started on anything. There's also CLG grant program, which runs through my office. That's what we use to do the nomination and the survey. We can also use it to do preservation on buildings. And so moving on, that's something that in the future we can do for sure. As well as there's other nonprofit preservation organizations that have all sorts of programs that then property owners can apply to. Any other questions about any of those things before I just want to talk a little bit about the historic district and the significance of it?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
It seems like at some point we've seen some things come across the planning commission in regards to Commercial Street, and my recollection was like, it seems like there was a couple or a group or a family that seemed to be like, maybe one comment that comes to my mind when they made comments was like, this is what we do, or this is kind of like our thing. And they gave me an impression like maybe they made it to Morgan somehow and they're buying buildings and restoring them and doing things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you're saying this, it makes me feel like there's obviously some benefits to running a business in these areas. And maybe that's advanced enough that maybe these people, or maybe there's groups that exist that
Certainly.
recognize that.
Yeah.
And are looking for those opportunities.
Definitely. See, having a national historic district is a draw for people who have these types of businesses. In fact, down in Spring City, down south near Ephraim and Manti, that is a national historic district, and it's become the place where people go and they buy the homes and they restore them. It's like little retirement projects. And so it's like we are creating a space where projects like that can happen and help revitalize our community, and keep people here, keep our houses here and looking nice and good for our community, as well as commercial opportunities as well. So there's definitely a lot of benefits, and that's a big reason why we did this. I mean, we wanted to celebrate our history, of course, but we also want to give people incentives for preserving and keeping this history and helping us keep our identity as a community, especially as we continue to grow. That this is a way for us to kind of hold on to that and find benefits with it. So the Miss Morgan Historic District, even though it's hopefully going to be listed on the National Historic Registry, but it's quantified as of local significance. There's different levels. Of course, there's national, state. The reason it's being put on the Historic Registry is that it has local significance. And we were able to identify at least 3 areas of significance that the historic district falls under. The first one is transportation. And just simply, we are one of the transcontinental railroad communities. And it's really unique having Commercial Street as a one-sided street facing the railroad. We don't know of any other community around that has that. And so that, that's something that maybe we would overlook and realize that is historically significant and something that gives Morgan an identity. Community planning, another thing that makes us unique is that Morgan, unlike most of the other pioneer communities at that time, Brigham would go and send people and tell them to settle these areas. That's not the case for Morgan. We had people that came here and chose to settle this area. And when it was settled, they didn't follow this traditional plat of Zion. It's a little bit different, and that creates a historic significance for us. As well as having the two communities of North Morgan and South Morgan, and the way the streets are labeled and all these things that create a unique identity for Morgan. Yeah, we want to preserve that and celebrate that. Then the third criterion of significance is, of course, the architecture. And we chose to sort of identify, because we're looking at a pretty big time period for our historic time period of significance. We're going from 1870 all the way to 1976. So I know in my office and working with my board, sometimes the things that they don't realize are historic and old and significant, because they're like, well, that's from the 70s or 60s, like that's not old. Nowadays it is. So we identified 5 different sort of time periods of significance and what was happening at those time periods, what the style of the architecture was at those time periods. So we want to celebrate and sort of identify that it's like, hey, your ranch style home, that actually is a historically significant home. It was built when Browning was here, when people were moving here to work for them. That's historically significant, and that's something we want to acknowledge and celebrate. So there were 480 buildings that are within the historic district boundary, and only 290 of those are what we consider eligible, and that they contribute and retain their integrity and add to the historic character. So those other buildings are either built out of time period, so after 1976, or they've been changed so much that they don't hold that historic character. This is only in the city, yeah. So in the future, we may look at other areas of the county and create something similar for them. But and I also just wanted to note that the buildings that are included in this, there's schools, there's public buildings, including the courthouse. That is a beautiful mid-century modern building. Again, people kind of are like, oh, that's an old building, but it's actually something to be celebrated. And we get people up here from Salt Lake and they're like, oh, I love this building. Like, you're so lucky you have it. We have residences on the list. We have commercial buildings, as well as a lot of agriculture. There's a lot of, right within the city, there's still these outbuildings and stuff that, again, that adds to the character and the history of our community. And we want to preserve those. And then, of course, also religious buildings. So there's a lot of different time periods. There's a lot of different types of buildings. But all those things kind of work together to create this historic district. I just added some source links down at the bottom. I will email this to you so we can just email it out to people. So you can just click on a link instead of typing this all in. But yeah, we're really excited. It's been really great working with Ty in getting this historic district set up. And we really do want it to be something that benefits the citizens of Morgan. So hope you guys are all on board and excited for it as well. Any other questions? The city, and we are working on doing some improvements on it this year.
So we own it. Rachel helped us apply and we just got a $72,000 grant to rehab it. So it's going out to bid. The train depot is over on Commercial Street, right next to the train tracks.
I didn't know what depot meant, but train depot, I got.
Anyway, the same thing, the remodel is gonna really focus on the historic rehabilitation. Bring it up to ADA compliance is the biggest thing, so it's actually occupiable.
Yeah.
As far as operationally, and so we're working on rehabbing that this year. So we're excited.
Yeah, and in fact, that is a building that's already on the historic registry. I think they applied for it back in the late 80s. And so again, we want to keep that one looking nice. And again, we got a grant for it, and there's a couple other grant opportunities that will help fund it because it's historically significant.
Will that be Rachel's new office?
That's what I want. I know. Yeah, I may not want it, but
We talked about it, but then they have to deal with me, and as long as the county wants to pay the rent that we're asking, so.
Yeah,
No, I'm just kidding.
that's the
Yeah.
issue is I'm already in the library. They're like, why would we move you? So,
But that was the discussion, is to either have the Historic Society over there or the chamber. The chamber's talking about becoming a visitors bureau. So just one of those.
something that would not just be office space, but something that visitors can go into and get information. We can have displays. The caboose, which you all helped us to acquire and fix up a few years ago. The interior of that is a blank slate. I'd love to see it be made into like a little mini museum or something that gives the history of Morgan. In fact, I found a couple months ago, somebody in Mountain Green that does model railroads and actually had built a model railroad through Weber a few years ago, but he took it down. So I'm like, you want to rebuild it for us? So yeah, there's some really cool opportunities. So.
I noticed the historic timeline was 76,
Mhm.
and I'm sure everybody in here was born before 76, other than me. So they're all historic. They're all historic, and I'm not historic.
We're not going to get into that. So, all right. And again, I was going to bring my business cards, but it's rturk@morgancountyutah.gov. So if you have any questions, or if you have any people from the community, we did have, so last week, the state approved our nomination. And so they will submit it to the keeper of the register. And within the next month or two, we will have approval, or that I think usually once the state approves a historic district nomination, it pretty much goes through. So we should be expecting that in the next couple of months. But there was a public, open public, comment period. And the people that we had contacting us, once we kind of explained that it won't affect them if they don't want it to affect them, most people were fine with it. So, and again, most people, when they hear, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. And maybe there could be some benefits. So again, if anybody contacts you, you now know what they're talking about.
Rachel, this
Yeah.
moment, do you need any action on our part?
Don't think so.
An update. And
Okay.
the reason why,
Yeah.
because they applied and all those homeowners got notice, we felt like it was a good opportunity.
That's
One for the
great,
planning
yeah.
commission, because the planning elements included in the historic and the council all work together. Just to get that explanation in case you hear
Okay.
anything out in the community,
Yeah.
and just can help clarify those little understandings that it's not a bad thing. And
Good
other thing we-
presentation. Thank you.
the other
Thank
thing I
you.
guess we
Yeah,
learned is
thank you.
Jay doesn't have gray hair. Those are actually highlights since he's so young. That's interesting.
Thank you,
At
Rachel.
least he has hair.
And we'll adjourn this meeting.
Hey, I didn't claim to be young. though.
Before I met Jimmy about the letter, they thought it was, they were sweet because they thought it restricted what they could do to their property.
Yeah, we had some people come in the office too, like,
For sure. Well, that's good to
but
know.
those are significant income tax credits.
Ah,
Like, cause it's a credit. It's not even. a
Thank you,
deduction.
Denise.
Right? So if you're-
I wonder, is it a refundable credit?
Yeah, I don't know.
Boy, that'd be sweet if it was. I mean, they'd pay you whether you had a
Well, I think,
liability or
I
not.
think that's.
See, I was-
On top of.
Well, it has to be so designated, but like a child tax credit, that's refundable. If you didn't have a dime's worth of liability, you still get it. Where a lot of credits just offset your income.
I was always under the impression
No, it's
that we could tear a
Some
building
credits
down
are
on.
just deductions. Others are
Some people
refundable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people are in the category.
Although if it were a business, I mean, if it were just starting out or whatever, it may not.
But I could buy a building on Commercial Street, nothing would preclude me if it was my private, I could tear it down. It's interesting because I heard the gentleman, what was his name that bought Buzzy's?
Thank you.
He's remodeling Buzzy's.
Sharing.
Commented to me the one day, he says, I should have tore it down and started from the beginning. And I didn't think he could, but obviously he could have done that.
Busy. Yeah.
I found out that,
And then the other thing we have questions, we don't.
No,
No.
She,
Well, at least we know.
yeah, well, and she,
No. We just.
it's her,
We
but
just
she's
hear them.
gonna donate it.
And then you take the recommendation.
Something-
And then we take the recommendation.
So it may. Be able to.
She wants it in the-
there.
That's what
She
she's
said
saying.
she could
Best thing to do this.
Find some place
We're not
where
gonna
all
say
things are under
we're not
construction.
We're doing projects.
Yeah, so I asked her, and she said she'd see if she.
So if you want to make a decision.
So she hasn't done any
It's not on the
paperwork.
agenda. You gotta have it on the agenda before we make a decision. We'll take under advisement. We'll look into
Hold on, I didn't even touch the paper. So-
I know, she's like, it's on the back.
Oh, okay. Good.
Okay.
Good to know. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All right.
Okay, see you. Good night.
it. Denise, do we have everybody connected?
As far as I know, you guys got all.
Dave,
the
how we
mics
doing?
on.
Good.
We're on. I'm on.
The only one's not Ty.
What? Why are they on?
See green, you're red.
I don't know why.
I don't know.
In case you need to say something. Oh, no, then you push it when you need to talk.
No, just leave them on, because some people are forgetting to turn them on, so I'm just leaving them all.
Okay.
So
I'll remember.
Lauren?
Yes.
Am I gonna be on? Yes, old timer, you can't hold it. I'm not good at this thing, but is that good enough?
Perfect.
Well, we'd like to call to order our general city council meeting, January 25th, 2022. A little late, but we'll move on. And I've asked Eric if he would say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Dave if he would offer us a word.
Okay.
So please pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we come before thee as we begin our city council meeting. We're thankful for the opportunities we have to come together to represent our community. We're thankful for the favorable circumstances that we can do such. We Ask thee to bless this meeting, ask that we might be inspired to make decisions that are in the best interest of our community. We pray that thy spirit might be with us tonight. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Minutes. You gotta do approve the minutes on the next.
Realized I had my hat on still.
Okay. I think that's where the motion, correct?
Yeah, so you can just say, I'll accept the motion for the approval of the minutes.
Yeah, I'm accepting motions for the approval of the minutes and the warrants of the date of
Any discussion?
any discussion.
Right there. It's December, right there. December 14th and December,
December, the city council meeting, December 14th,
the work meeting, and then
and then the work meeting of December 14th.
and
And
there's
the
one.
warrants are from January 10th to January 21st of 2022.
Typically, you might just give the council a minute to,
Any discussions?
peruse them or look at them and, say,
But
Has everybody had an opportunity to look at them?
there you go.
Is there any discussion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the Morgan City Work Council meeting on December the 14th and the minutes of the city council meeting on December the 14th and the one set of warrants.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Say
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Looks like that passes, Denise. Okay. Dave, welcome. We have you on the agenda and appreciate you taking time to have a concern in our little community. So we'll give you the floor at this time, and if you'd like to, do you want him to go to the pulpit? Do we have a mic for him or just sit there?
Hold on, Dave. We got to get you on the mic.
I don't know that I really need that. I think
We do. Online
I do.
recording.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need it.
All right.
It's a hot mic. Joe Biden needs to recognize that. You see what he said?
Push the button there.
Okay, you're ready.
Do you just push the button to talk?
Nope, you're good.
No, you're good now.
You're good. You're good. Oh, I don't need to do anything. Okay.
So Dave, if you could give us your name and your address before you
Okay.
begin.
My name is Dave Maynard. My address is 189 South Sandpiper Way, Morgan, Utah. And Mr. Mayor and council members, I appreciate this opportunity to address you this evening. My purpose for being here is to request that the city erect another basketball standard at the Riverside City Park. This would benefit the kids that use the park and also the community. It was also it would also help me in my efforts to teach children how to play basketball. I've been teaching kids in the area to teach basketball for several years, and I do it for nothing. But I've been using the Riverside Park to do that, but there's only one basketball standard over there that is usable. So it would facilitate my efforts if the city could put in another basketball standard just opposite the one that's there on the other side of the pavement. So that's the reason why I'm here, and that's the request that I'm making.
Does anybody have any comments or discussion for Dave?
So Dave, are you around, Dave?
I'm sorry?
You use that year round?
No, I just use it during the summer.
Yeah.
I try to run a basketball camp during the summer, right after school's out until school begins again. So I teach all ages. I don't turn anyone away. Anybody that's interested in learning basketball skills and fundamentals is welcome to come. Yeah. And I've been doing this for a number of years, and I've had as many as, last summer I had 40 kids that came during the summer. And then 1 year I had 80 kids coming during the summer. And I had kids coming from as far away as Colville, Mountain Green, you know. And I don't advertise because the word just seems to get around to parents that have children that have basketball interests. So, yes, Tony.
So David, you suggested that there's a standard be put up by the baseball diamond, on the baseball diamond side, is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Then one other quick question. So when I'm walking by the Mickelson Mile, am I free to come over and learn basketball skills from you when I'm walking by? Never mind. That was
You can teach, can you learn is the question.
okay, but you're talking about over by the baseball diamond on that side, directly across from where the one is right now.
That concrete pad that's there.
And did I hear you say you just offer this out of your grace and there isn't a charge to those that participate?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, you're gonna have to speak up. I'm a little hard of hearing.
I think I heard you say you just offer this and you don't charge the participants?
No, I don't charge anything for it.
And it's co-ed. He does
It's
both.
co-ed. I have boys and girls. Many of the kids that I've taught in the past are now playing high school ball for the high school, and some are even playing college ball. So I think what I'm trying to do for the community and for the kids is a worthwhile thing.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So I can respond. Normally we just take comment, but we've purchased 2 new standards.
Oh, have you?
Uh-huh.
Oh, great.
But we're waiting for the ground to thaw out.
Oh,
So the one of them needs replaced. So there's 2 of them there now. One of
Yeah, there's-
them's gonna be replaced, and then we're gonna add the other one.
on the
so-
opposite end.
So we'll have 3 hoops.
Oh, wonderful.
2 will be opposing, the other one will be off. But anyway, placement of those, what I would do is, I'll have our parks guy, just show you where he's planning on putting them, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page of where that 3rd standard ends up. But I guess the other one was replaced just a year or 2 ago.
Okay, good. That's great. That's great news.
The one's all rusted out. And so when I saw that on the agenda, I told her, wow, it's not very often that we're a little ahead of the game, but I did like this opportunity for you to come and so we could thank you. My daughter's Vivian, that has played a couple times with you. She just has so many other interests,
Wonderful.
and we really appreciate what he's doing. In fact, it's too bad there's not more of a progression of that group into rec into high school ball. There kind of seems to be a fall off point where it's, you know, a certain age, then every kid for themselves, if you can find a comp team or not. Yeah, and then back into the competitive side of high school. But he does an amazing job teaching fundamentals and just a love for the game. I love it. So.
Well, Dave,
Thank you.
this is amazing. We was gonna say we'll take this in consideration, but it's already in consideration.
Already in the works. That's wonderful news. Thank you. I'd also like permission to paint some lines on some basketball lines on the concrete, if that would be permissible.
Like the key and the foul line and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Coordinate that with your.
I think that's part of the installation. It sure should be.
Yeah, let's just consult with our parks supervisor. His name's Ty Lopshire. And just on the placement, and if you show him,
Is it Roe?
No, Ty Lopshire. So
Oh,
it was Roe Howard, but we had a change. Roe's working on becoming our building official.
Oh, okay.
And so Ty Lopshire was in the department But, we'll supply the paint, all that. And then I don't know if there's a specific way, just so that we do it right. Like, I don't want to obligate our guys to not get the measurements, or if there's a template or something, but if you wouldn't mind just, act as our little consultant so that it turns out nice, we'll do the work.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I'm familiar with how a basketball court should be
Laid out, yeah.
aligned, so where the lines should be placed on the basketball court, so.
Yeah, and I'd just like to piggyback on what Ty said. I mean, I've walked, you see me walking by you 100 times over there in the morning, but he has a pretty good group of kids over there every morning. And I think he does a great job with them, and you see them all sizes. So yeah, I appreciate your taking interest in our youth and teaching them some skills. So
Yeah,
that's nice of you to do that. So thank you.
thanks, Tony. Yeah, I think the youngest kids that I have some 6-year-olds and some that are older than that, that are in the 8th grade that are hoping to make the high school basketball team. So I try to help them achieve that goal.
Well, thank you. I know how Tony feels because he used to beat up on me on the basketball court all the time.
Not true.
So thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members. Appreciate your time.
Okay, our next item is the 2021 financial report. Jeff Ambrose, this is my first meeting with you. Thank you for coming. We'll turn this over to you.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and go over your 2021 audit report. First of all, I want to thank Denise and Lori. Throughout the process, we always have a lot of questions and they're always very responsive. And also a special word of thanks to Ryan Child and his crew. They're the guys that do the, clean everything up and get it ready for us to audit. And everything's always clean as a whistle. And we didn't have to make any adjustments this year. And Ryan does a great job for you. So we appreciate that. And it helps you guys out along the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly run through the report. I don't know if you have a PDF copy. I know Denise just passed out the printed copy. I'm going to be off the printed copy. So when I refer to page numbers, that's the page that I'm referring to. If you're looking at PDF, it's going to be off a couple pages. Pages 1 and 2 is our independent auditors report. This is where we express our opinion on the financial statements. And we've expressed an unmodified or clean opinion, which is the highest level of opinion we can render. And as I mentioned, the numbers we're going to look at are all materially stated and materially correct. And we did not have to propose any adjusting journal entries. As I mentioned before, Ryan had everything all cleaned up. The next section of the report is called Management's Discussion and Analysis. That's on pages 3 through 7. And this is a summarization of the basic financial statements, the notes, and some of the other supplemental information. So this is a section that just kind of boils everything down. And it also gives a good comparison between the year we're looking at and the prior year. So you can see how things changed. And as I go through the statements themselves, I'm going to point out some of the significant changes. So the first main statement appears on page 8. This is called the Statement of Net Position. This is the governmental terminology for your balance sheet. And it lists the assets, which are the things that you own, lists the liabilities, which are amounts you owe other people, and the net difference is called net position on this particular statement. Those of you that are in business or familiar with business type terminology, think in terms of retained earnings or owner's equity, that type of thing. That's what net position represents. Some of the things to point out here is your cash in the governmental activities increased $722,000. Business type activities, it went down about $402,000. Overall, cash is up $320,000 and restricted cash increased $209,000. Your assets went up, your capital assets went up about $500,000 in the governmental activity side and about the same amount in the business type activities. And I'll go into more detail on that as we get through things. Your liabilities decreased. So by virtue of the fact that your assets went up and your liabilities went down, your net position went up. It increased about 1.2 million in the governmental activities and a little over 700,000 in the business type activities. And that gives you a total increase in your net position of about $2 million. And that's a nice little increase for sure. Over on page 9, this is called the statement of activities. And normally, as I mentioned, if some of you are familiar with looking at a regular income statement, we generally start with revenues and then we subtract expenses from that. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board several years ago thought it would be meaningful to start out with expenses incurred by the government and then reduce those expenses by specific revenues that pertain to those. So you'll notice that the first column on the left-hand side of the statement there is the expenses. And from that, we deduct specific charges for services and certain types of grants to come up with a net cost of providing those services. And the reason the Governmental Accounting Standards Board thought that would be meaningful is because quite often we have people ask, why am I paying property tax? Why am I paying sales tax? And that's because providing governmental services does not pay for itself. So we have to charge these general revenues such as property tax, sales tax, franchise taxes, those types of things, because most governmental activities don't generate enough money on their own to sustain themselves. So that's the whole point of this format. As we get into the statements, we'll see the format you might be more familiar with. Your total expenses were up about $378,000, but most of your revenue categories increased as well. One of the big changes, one of the big increases was the fact that you received a CARES grant during fiscal 2021, and that was intended to kind of help offset the loss of some other revenues. And that was about $333,000. So that's reflected under the operating grants and contributions. Overall, your property taxes went up about $100,000. Sales and use tax went up $300,000. And that's a good sign. I think in 2020, we were kind of in a lockdown. People didn't go out, didn't spend money. I think we see an increase in activity there. And I think your sales tax revenue has been growing. You've added the hotels, so we're going to start seeing transient room taxes, those types of things. So that's a good improvement to see for the year. So your total general revenues and the governmental activities increased about $410,000. And you had a change in net position of a little over $1.2 million. And that's a nice healthy net income for you. As I mentioned before, your business type activities, your net income was down a little bit, but still it's very healthy at about $706,000. So that's a good increase. Okay, over on page 10, this is a balance sheet of just the governmental funds. And that's the general fund primarily, your capital projects fund, redevelopment agency, SID fund, and some other smaller funds. And that stuff's reported in the other governmental funds column. I'm going to try to focus primarily on the general fund column because that's where most of the activity takes place. Your cash, general cash was down about $210,000, but your restricted cash was up $280,000. So overall cash was up a little bit. Total assets increased about $157,000. And your total liabilities in that general fund were down $83,000 from the prior year. So overall, your fund balances increased about $281,000. And I need to point out to you that your unassigned fund balance, which is the amount of fund balance that's available for general operations, is within statutory limits prescribed by the state. It can't be lower than 5% of your estimated revenues, and it can't be higher than 35% of your revenues that you generated for the year. So it could be as high as $870,000, and you're at about $300,000. So you're kind of in that range there, and that's okay. Overall, your total governmental funds, the fund balance has increased about $823,000. The schedule on the next page is just a reconciliation schedule that reconciles the statement we just looked at to the governmental activities that we saw on page 8. What we're doing is we're adding in some of the capital assets and long-term debt and that sort of thing. Over on page 12, this is your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And again, I'm going to focus on the general fund. Taxes were up about $309,000. Licenses and permits were up $114,000. Intergovernmental revenue was down a little bit. However, the CARES Act revenue is down in the bottom section of that statement. It shows income of about $333,000. In the expenditure side, general government expenditures increased 121,000 and public safety increased about 353,000. And I think that's where you spent the bulk of the CARES revenue, if I remember correctly. So that's why that number was quite a bit higher. So it's kind of an offset of the CARES grant revenue that came in. Overall, your fund balance increased about 238,000 and the total for the governmental funds increased 171,000. The schedule on page 13 is again just a reconciliation form to take us from that governmental focus to the entity-wide focus on page 9. The next few pages pertain to the what we call the proprietary funds, and this is your water, sewer, electric, and sanitation fund, along with your internal service fund, which is your motor pool. The things to point out there is cash increased in all of those funds except for water, which decreased. And the reason for that is there was a significant amount of money spent on water line development and that sort of thing throughout the year. And so you used up a little cash there. Total assets increased across the board in all of those funds. On page 15, this is the liability side of that balance sheet. And virtually all of your liabilities were down. The total for the funds was down $229,000. And all of your net positions are increased for the year. So that's a healthy sign that we like to see. Over on page 16 and 17, this is our operating statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Most of the charges for services were about where they were last year, except that the electric fund increased about $156,000. Overall for those funds, it went up about $163,000. Most of the expenses were pretty much where they were the year before, except for electric, which the expenses increased $523,000. On page 17, we show where the other revenue came in. And the other revenue primarily consists of impact fees, hookup fees, interest revenue, that sort of thing. And you can see that third line up from the bottom, all of the funds had an increase in their net position except for the electric fund. The expenses went up higher than the revenues came in there. The next two pages of the report are just what we call the cash flow statement. It's a hybrid of the balance sheet that we saw on pages 14 and 15 and the operating statement that we saw on 16 and 17. Most of your cash inflows come in from day-to-day operations. You didn't issue any new debt, so there was no inflow from that. And most of the outflows go toward the acquisition and construction of capital assets. If you look in the water column there, you can see that in the third section down, acquisition and construction of assets, water spent about $857,000 on water lines during the year. And the electric fund spent about $224,000 for a total of the enterprise funds of just over $1 million. So that's where a lot of the outflows went. And then page 19 is just a reconciliation statement. The next section of the report appears on pages 20 through 48. And Ryan writes very clear and extensive footnotes. And so these notes are just intended to provide some additional understanding of the numbers we just looked at. Not going to go through a lot of those, but I would have you turn to page 35 and 36. This is where he's made a note that shows the changes in the capital assets. The information on page 35 deals with the governmental activities, which is the general fund, capital projects fund, RDA, et cetera. And you can see that the increases are in the second column from the left. And a lot of the machinery and equipment increase was money spent on this building. I think we're seeing some of it around us. Motor pool assets increased about $308,000. That was primarily trucks and tractors. And in infrastructure, which is some street projects and some fiber related construction that occurred in the governmental funds. Over on page 36, this is the changes in the capital assets for the water, sewer, electric, and sanitation fund. And as I mentioned before, the big increase there was construction of water lines. And under the capital equipment being depreciated, you bought a big bucket truck for the electric fund. And that's the big change there. Note number 3 on pages 37 through 39, talk about your outstanding debt. You really don't have a significant amount of debt compared to other cities. So this just kind of gives you a breakdown of what the maturing principal payments are for the next few years and the changes that take place. The next section of the report I want to look at starts on page 49 and 50. And this is a budget and actual comparison for the general fund. And you'll note that most of the revenue variances are favorable, which means that revenue came in higher than you anticipated. And on page 50, where we show the expenditures, virtually all of those variances are also favorable. There was a slight unfavorable variance for the administrative department, but it was not significant enough that we had to show that as a compliance finding. It's less than 5%. So most of those variances are favorable. And what that tells you is that you did a good job of monitoring your budget throughout the year and you stayed within your budgetary constraints. Pages 51 through 54, I won't spend a lot of time on, but these are some required schedules. And the information is provided by the Utah Retirement Systems. This gives you some statistics that pertain to your participation in the Utah Retirement Systems, where you provide retirement benefits for your employees. And I just would comment that most states have a retirement system. Utah's is very healthy. So your employees should feel very secure in the amount of money that they'll have when they retire. As I mentioned before, pages 55, 56, there are some smaller governmental funds that don't get reported separately. This is a detail of those various funds. Page 55 is the balance sheet. Page 56 is the operating statement. And the totals on page 55 will tie to the numbers we saw on page 10. And the totals on page 56 will tie to the numbers we saw on page 12. And then the last section of the report is some additional reports that we are required to include by the state auditor. The one on page 57, we have to evaluate your internal controls over financial reporting and your compliance with certain laws and regulations. And this is a clean report. We did not find any material weaknesses in internal control, nor did we find any material deviations in compliance with laws and regulations. And then on pages 58 and 59, this is some additional compliance work that we have to look at. State auditor spells out certain areas that we have to specifically look at. Those areas are listed in the top paragraph there. Again, this is a clean report. We did not find any material deviations in compliance with these areas, nor did we find any issues in internal controls over these various compliance areas. And then the only other thing I need to tell you is I'm required to tell you that as we conducted the audit, we didn't have to change our planned scope. We didn't have to make any modifications to how we did the work. We didn't have any difficulties in performing the audit, and we didn't have any disagreements with management. And as I mentioned before, we did not find any misstatements that we had to suggest that be corrected. So overall, very clean, and your numbers improved from the prior year, and I think that's probably a good report for you. So any questions that I can address?
I have a couple of them, Jeff.
Okay.
First one, the letter, the page 57 to the mayor and council, you talk about a deficiency in internal controls and identify two, a material weakness and a significant deficiency. And then you make the statement that there's no material deficiency, but you're kind of silent on significant deficiency.
Yeah, this is a canned standard letter, and we don't like it.
Okay.
To be honest with you, and it's just for that reason, because what they have us do is they have us report on the highest level of potential problems.
I wondered if that
so
was
if we don't have a material weakness, it also means we didn't have any of those other
nothing
things.
below
Yeah, right.
is there either.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
good answer.
Yeah, good question.
And then the statement that we looked at is different than this one, maybe a draft or a worksheet. So my page numbers are different, but on the statement of net position and the one that we had to review had comparisons between the years, the 20 and the 21. But in the statement, you make the comment during the year ending June 30th, there were some significant events. Were any of those events concerns that we need to be worried about? When you use the word significant, that.
Are
kinda struck
you
my
looking
attention.
at page,
This is page 4 of
page
the.
4?
Yeah.
Okay,
the-
yeah.
In the PDF file.
Okay, yeah. So it's part of management's discussion and analysis. This is part of the purpose of management's discussion and analysis is, first of all, to boil down the overall financial statements into kind of a summary form, and also to discuss things that management thought was significant during the year. And on the last page, to potentially talk about things that are going to be significant for the coming year. So that is that's a statement by management. And I'm assuming Ryan had you guys take, or at least Ty and maybe Denise take a look at this part of the that thing before it was issued. But those are areas that he felt, and perhaps Ty and Denise felt, were significant as far as pointing out during the year. I don't know if he had you guys review that part or not. And
Yeah, I mean, significant could be a positive event. Or it could be a negative
absolutely,
one.
absolutely,
So
yeah.
It
Yeah.
just says significant, or were there any that were negative that we would need to be?
I don't
concerned with?
think so. I think, as I mentioned before, I think in the prior year, we saw kind of a decrease in some of the revenues because the economy was so
Okay.
shut
COVID,
down
yeah.
because of COVID and that sort of thing. And I think we're kind of clawing our way back. And hopefully it's onward and upward from here. We'll see what the rest of the year brings. But I think, yeah, significant can be negative, but we didn't see anything significantly negative
Yeah.
that occurred.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I've got some maybe just changes that'd be specific to Ty, and I'll talk with him later on that. But the only other question I had was on the management discussion analysis was page 6. Again, on the PDF, it said that at the very top, it's got business type activities.
Okay.
And we've got, you talk about operating income. Is that a net operating income?
Let's see. It
So
says
go
for
1,
the-
2, 3, 4 sentences down. The water, sewer, electric, and sanitation funds had operating income.
Yeah. What he's doing there is he's giving you respectively what happened in each of those places. If you will go to page, and I'm hoping those are going to tie out to the operating income on page 16.
Okay.
The bottom line on page 16, which is the first page of your statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. So under each column, water had an operating income of 60,000, and that's what he's got there. Sewer had operating income of 331. Electric had a loss of 248, and sanitation had an operating income of 35. Operating income is just your operating revenues minus your day-to-day expenses, and does not contemplate including things like impact fees, hookup fees, interest income, non-operating type things. So that's what he's trying to tie out right there.
So, yeah, so it would be net then if we're subtracting the
Yes,
expenses
yes,
out.
yeah.
So I guess maybe a little bit of one to watch would be the electric where, we had a fair deficiency over the income.
Yeah. Let me take a look at one line item on 16 and see. In electric, you have $200,000 of a line item called depreciation.
Okay.
Depreciation is a non-cash expense.
Gotcha.
And so that's a big chunk of that, but it's still something to kind of keep an eye on, because we always like to try to cover our depreciation expense
Sure,
too.
we need to replace
try to-
equipment down the
right,
road. Yeah.
Exactly. Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Good answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hey, on page 37,
Okay.
we're talking about the bonds.
Yes.
So that Series 2010 bond is 5.61% interest on that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then on the next page, the other bond is 2018. That's a 1.50%. My question is if I was a homeowner, I'd look to refinance. I mean, does that make any sense or?
Given the fact that it's $500,000, that's something you'd want to have your bond consultant take a look at.
Jeff, I can help with that one.
Yeah, I think there's.
What's that?
I can help with that one.
Yeah.
Too. The The first one was a BABS bond, Build America.
That's a Build
And
America
so
bond.
we pay the interest, but then we get a rebate.
A rebate, yeah,
Rebate
yeah.
back. So what's the net interest on that, Ty? Do you know? I mean.
It's 3 something. I can't remember. I knew one time, but it changes kind of year by year where you're at in the payoff
And
schedule.
it also depends on how much Congress appropriates to rebate that interest. So it can fluctuate from year to year. And because of that, it may not be callable. I don't remember.
Yeah, I looked into the first, that's one of the first things we did before we got the other sewer bond is to see if it made sense to refinance into the other one, and it didn't at the time. But a lot of that was because of that structure and what we obligated ourselves to on that, on that payback. I don't know that it is callable.
I don't know that a lot of times those Build America bonds aren't. So,
Yeah.
and it's, it's still, it seems like a high rate, but if Congress appropriates a rebate each year, the net effective rate is less than 5.6 for sure.
Ask us again next year and this will be a great rate.
Yeah.
Because we're locked in, right?
No, that's a good question.
No, just-
That's,
Just
it's
saying where
good to
everything's
watch
headed.
those types of things because if it was a regular type bond, certainly it's worth looking into to talk about refinancing it. Good question.
Any other discussion?
Does this need to be accepted?
It does, it needs a motion, doesn't it, Gary?
Okay, I propose that Tony's gonna give a motion. Good luck.
Mayor, no.
I'd move.
I make a motion that we approve of or accept the 2021 financial report that was just discussed and presented to us by Jeff Ambrose.
We have a second?
Dave got it.
Tony on the motion and Dave on the second. Is there any other discussion? If not, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
Oh, we're not adjourned.
We got to vote.
Well, oh, wait,
We got to vote.
We got to vote.
Oh,
All in favor, huh?
all in favor
Aye.
and any opposed? Yeah. Well,
Yeah, we're not
So
adjourned yet.
we're not adjourned yet.
well, I'm adjourned from this meeting and we're going to go to a, sorry.
No,
We still
you got to go to,
Oh, Ty.
you got to go to Ty first. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. New mayor stumbling up here.
No, I like it because our last meeting went so fast. I understand where you're at. So we started this thing at 6. You can't fall behind on the expectations. So the first one is our FEMA project from that windstorm. We got our second and final payment on that reimbursement process of, I gotta get my glasses back on. 41,758.41. So I just want to really thank Denise again for all of her work. Of course, our whole staff during the wind event, but afterwards, accounting for it and doing all the reporting and jumping through all the FEMA hoops wasn't fun, but Denise did a great job with that. In fact, she was on vacation when the final sign-offs came through, and I decided just to wait for her to come back and let you finalize it. So between both payments, we ended up with $80,619 reimbursed from that, and mostly because of Denise's work on accounting for it. And it's a full-time job, so it's not fun. I used to do that for a living, so I'm glad I don't do that anymore. Yeah, it's just a couple project updates. So we had our bid opening today for our sidewalk project. So if you remember, we have a Safe Route to Schools grant that'll do a sidewalk from here to 300 West, from 100 West to 300 West. And then also resurface that road. So we haven't awarded it yet, but we had seven bids. They were all pretty competitive. And the lowest bid was 242,000. And the engineer estimate was 288. So it came in just under the engineer estimate, which is great news, since the next project I have to update us on went the other direction. So we only had one company bid on the diffuser project out at the sewer lagoon. We already have all the parts on site. And that one came in at over 800,000, and the engineer estimate was more in the 500,000. So what we've done is I called kind of timeout. I have a follow-up meeting just to see, in the bid, if there was any uncertainties or any reason to over it, we'll honor, really, it's either gonna be we have a project or we don't, if that makes sense, where we only have the one company. And they've agreed to work with us to see if what gets included, what didn't, or maybe work with the engineer, like, hey, that's already paid for, you didn't need to bid on that, just to see. And if it is just the actual cost and they say, no, it's, this, then we probably will just keep that project on hold until we can
Get more interest.
yeah, get more interest, or that sort of thing, just to let you know, it's just too far out of the ballpark. But if we do get close, or there's something that maybe we could do in-house, or just to see what the pinch points are, then I'll bring that one as well for approval. So we're still hopeful.
So Ty, I have a question. That doesn't necessarily inhibit the sewer system at this point?
Well, it doesn't help the sewer system for sure, but I think it falls within my explanations back to the state. We only violate that permit every so often. This will help. This will extend the life of the sewer lagoons, but price wise, I don't know that. I mean, we're right there. So I think I'll either hold off and see if we can't get an ARPA. I did apply for ARPA money on this project and 3 water projects. We didn't get awarded any of those projects. They went to a different list of, anyway, there's one. Yeah, it's pretty significant. So we'll either, we'll start here, and now I'll go back to the state and just say, we either need some help with this financing, or we're just gonna have to do our best to not violate our permit, just to let them know where we're at. But it is what it is. And I don't think that's unreasonable to say you just can't spend your way out of a permit violation. I mean, nobody's system's perfect unless there's some extra help there. So maybe that'll help us be more competitive on a next round of ARPA money. I don't know.
I guess that was my question, is, that's 50-60% higher than the engineer's estimate. If you took that to the state and presented that to them, would that possibly help in getting some funding from them to cover that spread?
Yeah, I think the other thing is we've been in contact with them. In fact, I included them before we did the diffusers to say, here's where we're at. You have the reports, but they couldn't really approve anything, just to keep them in the loop on just saying we're doing everything we can. So we keep that communication going. So I think it would help us. One, it's showing that we're doing everything we can, but 2, there's just some things that's just like at what point you help us out. So
go ahead.
Is there a requirement for a time period between this bid and when you can bid it out again? Do you have to wait a certain period, or can that happen immediate?
no, we can just say we didn't get what we needed. And
I wonder if the state would have any help on maybe companies that would be interested in bidding.
no. So the engineer company,
You're the engineer.
they know most of
Right.
I mean, they put it out. It's all on the same bid
Mhm.
system or whatever. Yeah.
So-
And we had four entities come. So we had a pre-bid meeting just to let them know what the project was. They all looked pretty interested and then
Showed
just didn't come
interest.
back. So the only other caveat we could maybe think of as time of year. So, you know, maybe they already have their projects lined out for the year, or maybe it's because, you know, we opened it and December, closed it in January, that they just didn't have the staff to put in for the project. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be
You know,
seasonal.
yeah, so we'll, anyway, just, we're still just kind of working through our options.
So could this put a moratorium on building permits, or
No.
you're not in that danger?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I would be, I don't know the right, we're not gonna do another moratorium. We'll,
We just need to have Tony flush less.
I'll work on that.
Well, I mean,
or more, put more water with it, Tony.
Yeah. Twice.
No, it's,
Flush twice.
no, it's just the health of lagoons, but because it's not a consistent, it's an intermittent temporary problem, but it is the health of the lagoons. We're just gonna keep working through it, but the reason why we went this direction was the effectiveness for the cost. And when you get up to that, then you're saying, why didn't we just, you know, take the guts out of the lagoon and start over? But
And that has to be somewhat seasonal though, correct?
yeah, it's been, yeah, and the lagoons just haven't been healthy. In fact, there's some numbers between the three ponds that we're actually picking up between, because of the oxygen, it's almost like we're adding to some of our numbers on the third pond. So that might be something else we say is like, well, until we get this figured out, let's bypass pond 3 and just have a 3-pond rotation. You know what I mean? Like there's some, like, we're not gonna stop. We're not gonna just violate our permit because it is what it is. We're still gonna do what we can, but it's just right now that project's in limbo till we figure out. So hopefully we'll come back with some better news. So I didn't mean to, any other, I mean, the sewer's been a big deal since I started, right? So you'll have a lot of interest in
yeah,
that.
it's,
Upside down badly there for a while, so.
yes.
We've made progress.
Yeah, but
I mean, the bottom line of it is, it's just old. It's just a very old system.
yeah, we've done some
And
pretty
we've
good
done some
things.
good
Like,
things.
yeah, we even had, you know, because not all the ponds got dredged, we came and they did a sludge judge where they measure the depth to make sure that it's level and that it's, you know, that hasn't built up tons of sludge, and that hasn't been the problem. I mean, I'm pretty,
Did the head works?
yeah, I'm just saying, like, we're not out of touch with our system. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? We're just doing what we can. And I think all of that discussion is what changes the discussion with the state. Right? So to ignore your system and violate a permit or have your whole system just fail because of lack of effort or maintenance is a different discussion. So I don't think we're having that discussion. It's just, well, just,
Do you see any time on the horizon where permits would have to be halted?
no.
Okay.
No, so the big one is the phosphorus limits, which we have tons of headroom on. We have tons of capacity on phosphorus. And that's the reason why those phosphorus caps were the big deal last time. And so I think that it's more of a balancing effort in our permits that we're dealing with. It's not the big concern of phosphorus that was so terrible. And then we do have a fourth pond. So in worst case scenario, we just stop discharging, you know, so many days a month, put it in our pond and let it settle. You know what I'm saying? Like operationally, we're just not gonna,
You have options.
we'll do what we can. We're not gonna,
Options, and plus I must admit, when I toured that, I'm really impressed with Kale.
yeah, it's kind of a lot for a one-man show, isn't it?
Amazing.
So, you know, and so each one of these enterprise funds, it's a $2 million company essentially ran by 1.5. You know, we got, of course, the office staff that helps with the payments and coding and billing and operator, one guy. It's pretty
Amazing.
Pretty good. So,
Nice to instruct the city what to flush.
There's a lot of,
yeah, we'll get to the trend. Yeah, we need to do some public outreach and some training and stuff on that, but
That's a big thing anymore. You go to some of the wastewater shows and it's a big thing on educating the public on what you can and can't flush and what it does to the system. Because it legitimately can mess up a system.
Yeah.
It really can.
That's interesting. On the water side, we encourage the public not to do too much. On the waste side, we encourage them to do more because like Ty says, the more water you've got, the easier it is to treat. So it's a dilemma.
Is there any more discussion?
so I was just a couple more.
Okay.
Projects. So then, we'll talk more, but, we're working on the commercial street realignment over on the other side of the bridge. So I think it told everyone we're gonna build our own road to connect the bridge to as part of that project. You know, pull that out and make it our own project. So that design's almost done and probably in the middle of February, we'll have something ready to put out to bid on that project. So that's coming. General plan project update. We just got our first draft. Our staff are kind of reviewing. I think you might have got emails or we'll get an email just for our own internal plan. The overall plan looks good. I think the map, there's still some questions on what's this mean and why is this? So we'll have some back and forth that way, but that project's getting close to the end. Then I won't go through it right now, but we have the drawing for our basement project, so that's going out to bid. So if you want to look at the design or whatnot, I won't do that now. I'll just hang on to this just so we can kind of keep moving on. Then
No concerns yet on meeting the deadline.
well, we haven't put it out to bid yet, so it's,
You're not sure. Didn't you have till June to finish it?
yeah. So that and the depot grants are both to be completed by June. And where this is in more of the construction, like building construction side, I'm not sure. You know,
Could you get an extension?
we'll see.
Yeah.
We're gonna start.
You get it started, they'll have to go on with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be okay. And then just during the legislative policy committee, a lot of the updates, I was just gonna let you know that House Bill 151 is probably of my biggest concern. Just something for you to pay attention to. And I did send an email to Representative Birkeland just to let her know kind of how it impacts Morgan, but that bill is aimed at making it so we cannot incentivize retail.
Right.
We can't.
Done away with it.
Yeah, the incentives, and it's all based on a Wasatch Front problem, if you ask me. People competing for businesses, and also the idea is that commercial land should be housing instead of commercial, and we have such limited. Our commercial district is not the problem. We have miles of expansion opportunity for housing all on our borders. When that day comes, but we shouldn't be limited on developing our own tax base as a community. So in Morgan, that'll just put tons of pressure on property tax if we're not allowed. So if you think about, we did a development, an incentive with the dealership. That's 25% of our total revenue is the dealership. And then we did the hotel. That's a big incentive, but the spill off effect from the restaurants that benefit and the gas stations and keeping people here just overnight, the grocery store, and having an amenity, right? Like having that segment of our economy that we just, so to tie our hands just doesn't make any sense for Morgan. I just don't like the bill at all. And the league is trying to massage it so that it sounds nice. and that they'll give and take on it. And for Morgan, it should just be a flat no, in my opinion. And, you know, we're just a little voice in the overall thing, but the one thing we could do is just ask for an exemption of 4th class counties. Right now, 5th and 6th class are exempt, but 4th class isn't. And that's really I mean, if you're gonna go for it, okay, but we really need to not let that happen to Morgan, because we're not competing. We're just trying to grow our own economic base. It's backwards, so.
What do we need to do to get our word out? Maybe Gary, any thoughts? And Ty?
It's been working good. So,
Should we call?
yeah, that always helps. Good. That wasn't in the LPC discussion. I brought it up, but
Who's our representative now? It's not Berkland.
it's Berkland. And Milner.
No.
No,
I got it. Well, I don't know. I got a Christmas card from somebody else thinking that that's changed.
I don't think it's Stuart Adams. I think you send that, you know.
No, that's who I got it from, was Adams.
Yeah. Today.
Oh, not the city.
Okay.
Dave, I got my Christmas card today. From Stuart.
Well, or even the bill sponsor, right? Just reach out to the bill sponsor and say, what do you?
You know who that is?
Politics behind it are the governor supports leadership. So the only question is how something will pass. Mike Schultz is the sponsor, he's leadership.
Yeah.
But the Senate is not as anxious. But it's not there. I think you have to get certain things, maybe not an outright cash gift to a big box. The league's taken a position that it's the big box that tries to talk. And so they've tried to put into the code just simple change in definition. A big box is just to say, yeah, big box.
Yeah, but they call that 80,000 square feet, which is not huge. It's like, I don't know what our grocery store is, but we're not. Anyway, the whole
Ottawa's not.
wasn't, and by the time they get with so many exemptions, then I don't know what. Anyway, I'm not trying to be political here. I'm just saying that concerns me. And here's the other reason why I bring that up is because I haven't gone to the other entities for the RDA, and I'm gonna postpone my visit to the RDAs before we redo any agreement, because that
May not matter.
yeah, it may not matter.
Yeah, that's true.
And really what we're talking about is for this upcoming, or the rest of the year. So at the end of the legislative session, I will go back, you know, from the RDA and maybe redo that. But at this point, you know, I'm not sure what we're even gonna be capable of doing, so.
Okay.
Then, yeah, thanks Gary for all your help too. Then the mid-year conference for the league's been announced, so it's April 20th to 22nd in the Dixie Center in St. George. If any of you are interested, just let Wanda know and she can do the registrations. So I have some hotel rooms already booked, and just because that's how you have to go early if you want the pricing. So I got a anyway, $85 a night room.
So,
and a $96 a night room, and it'll just skyrocket.
to have an interest, we ought to do it. We let her know right away.
Yeah, let's just let her know, and then she can get you registered, but then I'll know I have more hotel rooms than we're gonna need,
Oh,
so
I
I can
see.
just cancel which ones we don't use.
Oh, you've already set them aside.
Yeah, I set them aside just to that we got, so. That's it's a good conference and a good legislative update. All of the breakouts have to do with, I don't care what the topic is, but all of them seem to include, and here's what just changed in the legislature about this topic. So that's a good one. I think that's all I have.
Is there any other discussions?
A couple of items. We talked last meeting about potential nominees for the planning commission. Is it too late to add names to that?
No, I'm waiting on everybody's input.
Okay, so I created a list. But, and I'm going to pass this out if that's all right, Gary. I've got about 16 names, but just so everyone's familiar with them. But you'll notice that the gender is female. And I mentioned before that I think it would be well to maybe consider that. And these are people in our community that I think could well serve. And it's kind of as a hallmark, I wanted somebody that maybe wouldn't have a bias and could make good decisions.
It is in order.
No, but there were a couple that stand out to me, but I so stated if somebody asked, but if they didn't, there they are. There's the ones that could make sense. Secondly, Tony and I attended the Planning Commission meeting, and let's give just a little bit of an update on that. And Tony, you fill in on where I miss out. Okay.
You'll catch it all, Dave.
Yeah. So they're required to elect a chair and at least a chairman of the committee, I think, at least annually, but they should have done it before now. So
July.
I'm not sure what happened, why they didn't, but they attempted to do that on Tuesday. And unfortunately, there were only 6 there. And there were 2 nominations. One was the co-chair, which was Jim Brown, and one was the chair, which was Nate. And the vote was taken and it was a tie, 3-3. So rather than flipping a coin, is it Steve or, yeah. Yeah. Steve said, let's just wait until the next meeting when all the commissioners are there, then then it'll have to be one or the other. So
Or at least an odd number of commissioners.
yeah, well, yeah, or at least an odd number for sure. So they didn't get there. But the other big item of discussion had to do with ordinances and is it Wilf or Wilt? WILF. Yeah, Wilf was there in person, and he's suggesting that we need to update some of our ordinances, including, and he was focusing on the conditional use permits. And what's happened in the old days, we could pretty much approve or deny a conditional use just at will. Almost didn't even need an explanation. In fact, it just says the ordinance says the commission may deny a permit, may grant a permit. And that's almost period right there. I mean, it goes on, but state law, state statute, and Gary, you can confirm that and probably be a little bit more eloquent than me, but it says that basically a conditional use is a permitted activity with conditions. And so the recommendation is that we update our statutes our ordinance so that it aligns with the state and be specific. There were some of our conditions that we have right now are pretty general, and we want to stay away from the general just kind of at will type arrangement and focus more on specifics. And bottom line was he was going to go back and come up with some wording, some things that may work, rather than, I think the feeling was, at least it went that direction, rather than just redo the whole ordinance, say take the pieces that were the most problematic and start with those and come back with a recommendation. Another one that was a concern was the appeals of a decision. Recommendation is that the appeal board or body is not the council, that it be and I think that's what we use right now, but he wanted it to be, I think, maybe a little bit more specific, that it be a hearing officer, for example. Couple of items there he would recommend just plain doing away with. But so I think down the road, we'll be looking at that. I would suspect next meeting, he'll be prepared to present something. Ultimately, that would come to us for an approval. Is that correct? Okay. Would that require a public hearing also? Okay. And speaking of that, Gary, we talked about as a group here eliminating the second public hearing for the council. And I think we were all generally favorable for that, Steve. And Gary recommends, but he suggests that in a lot of cities, the planning commission is the only one that listens to a public hearing. And I think we agreed that even with our most controversial one, the subdivision there a little over a year and a half ago, that a lot of the statements that we heard the second time did not change almost at all from the first discussion. So we said, let's eliminate the second one with an idea of a notice to us to, if there is a public hearing on something that's controversial, that we all tune in to make sure we hear what they are. What do we need to do to continue with that?
We changed that.
So we're good to just do it. We just don't need to publish it.
So, I think our ordinance, I know our ordinance is more stringent than that.
Okay.
We can go in and change that.
Okay.
I can go in and take-
That'd be something you could help us with. All right. Yeah, I know you mentioned the two of them today, but I think we were pretty much a consensus that let's just go with the one.
Good in that.
Yeah.
So to get me up to date on that, that would be the planning commission, say on this subdivision that we're talking about. They wouldn't keep coming to the city council, but they would take care of that and the recommendation from the planning commission to the city council.
And then
Now,
The subdivision approvals, I think they come to the city council. Sure that they come to the city council.
Final.
Preliminary is planning commission.
Yeah.
And there's a hearing usually. for the planning commission.
But
Subdivision approvals.
our most recent, the Nye property had the two public hearings. We had one in the planning commission and then a separate public hearing in the city council. So we would only just do the one public
So,
hearing.
so when it come to us for final approval, we would not necessarily list a public hearing. It would just be on the agenda as final approval for,
Just be a public meeting.
You know, I think we handle that like we have started doing. We'd hold a work meeting. I think that worked very well with the Nye property. We'd have most of the discussion out of the way by the time we went to our meeting, and then it's more a matter of do we go along with it or don't we, or do we table it and so forth.
so for the council to be up to date on it, we would depend on Dave and Tony.
Be one option, or you could listen in either in person or via the, or go back the next day when Teresa posts it to the planning commission, if you can't be there that night, and say, I want to listen to just the public hearing portion of that. And again, we all need to do that because Rupp subdivision, there was a ton of information and we were all getting it in addition to the public hearing, but still a ton of information that was very helpful in making a decision.
You know, so in my opinion, wouldn't that make the planning commission feel more like they're doing their job? If we don't have another public hearing with the city council.
yeah, I think so.
Potential's there, yeah.
I guess I could add a little bit to that as well. I know one of my pet peeves for quite a while was sometimes we were getting sent from the planning commission to the city council for final approval with caveats. You know, okay, so here it is for final approval. If the developer does this or if the developer does that. But over the years, I think we've made it really clear to the planning commission. I think they do a really good job of this. It comes to us, we want it cleaned. We want it without any conditions or any caveats. But by the time it reaches the city council, we just want them to, you know, approve, give a final approval without 2 or 3 conditions or,
What
you know.
was they were sensitive to that. What was the subdivision that they said we'll table until you get the conditions met? It was
The one last week,
Center Point, wasn't it?
the one we just heard the other day.
Yeah, it was Ben Russell.
Yeah, it was the rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so they're sensitive to that.
Yeah, they do a great job. It's gotten 100% better over the last few years, you know. But there for a while, I mean, we was getting, it was on the agenda for final approval, and there it was for final approval for the city council with 5 or 6 laundry list things left to be done, you know, and that drove me nuts. So,
And didn't we sort of run into that with Ryan Nice project?
well, no, we haven't got the final on Ryan now yet, so, you know, that's coming down the pike.
But
We were only
didn't we have some contingencies?
We just changed the general plan and the
Plan,
zoning.
zoning.
There's probably still work to do.
But when that comes to us as a city council
Work that
for
the
final,
city
we
will
just.
jump in on and tell him,
we wanna click.
you know, what he can do and can't do.
There is, well, I have one other thing to add too, Dave, and that is, if that's all right, if you're
You're on.
with the planning was, Will, he seems pretty intent on going through a lot of our ordinances and our land use and like he did the other night, he took a portion of it, the conditional use, and made some, I thought, very valuable suggestions.
Yeah. I mean, we're
And
taking
so,
his
so that's
recommendations.
things the planning commission will work on and ultimately will come to us. But I think he's gonna continue to look at that and make some suggestions, and so that's probably a good thing, so.
I recommend that while you have
Yeah, do what you can.
Yeah.
this is one of the few jurisdictions.
Yeah.
He is the best planner for years and years. And he is your ordinance. He's just sensitive. He knows that he's got history. He's
Mhm.
up the legislature. He's been up there every year, I think.
Is that right?
And so he knows the changes, he knows the history. And as he goes through, he can do a really good job of changing Morgan's ordinance.
Mhm.
I can tell you, just to give you an idea of how much it costs in subdivision work, right? And it was over $40,000.
Holy smokes.
And if you get Will
Yeah,
to work on these sections, Morgan will have the best.
yeah.
planners
Will
ordinance
shine.
in the entire state.
That's what he seems intent on doing.
Yeah,
So
He also made the statement, just a side note, that Morgan isn't the only town or city that needs updating. He said it's widespread.
Yeah, absolutely. Late. Still has changes.
That's your job.
I got one more thing though. As Dave sat and talked about the public hearing, I had maybe an opposing thought of, it is nice for the public to be able to have multiple times where they can express their opinions on something that's going to happen. And so, I mean, we give them just one chance to be able to come before a board to actually give their point of view. You've only got one opportunity to present your case. I mean, I get your point, but also it's also nice, almost transparent to have multiple areas, multiple people that you could present information to. And so
Couldn't they just come and do public comment?
Yeah.
Or we could do the public meeting if it
So-
was warranted.
So after the public.
I mean, I'm
hearing,
just saying.
After the public hearing, though, if there's lingering, they still have an opportunity to have public comment and come and just say, here's my.
Yeah, and I got a lot of information via phone calls and letters and emails after that initial public hearing.
See, and that's what,
There's nothing wrong during public meeting with allowing. If there's something that is really, really new and you might send it back to the planning commission. Normally, they're pretty much exhausted. If you remember the guy that stood up here and talked about.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's why we do it. Well, and then it's an opportunity too for people to just dig in stronger in their position. Again, I don't know that it softens anybody's stance. I think when we noticed with Rupp that in fact, there were some statements that were made earlier that said, no, I didn't mean that. You know, when one commenter said, I'd be willing to go along with a 12,000 foot lot, but he said, that isn't what I meant. I mean 20,000. So he just had time to think about it and just dug in more than he was before.
So on the agenda in our public comments, as I'm sitting here reading it right now, it says that, you know, the open comment cards are available, be filled out by 5 PM of the day of the meeting. Could somebody still come in here and just give a public comment if it's on the agenda, even though they're not? They haven't filled out a card to be make a public comment. I'm just reading from our agenda right now.
He's asking if I walked in at
And I didn't fill out the card. and I just-
7:30 and I didn't fill out the card.
Could I still make a public comment?
No.
What Mayor Little would do is if he saw somebody come in, he would come down prior to the meeting starting and find out what they were there.
I need to also ask you if you had anybody but I just
That
wanted,
had emailed or.
Yeah.
Or if I knew of anybody.
but I guess I was just wondering, could I walk in at 7 o'clock and, you know, what's the public comment section on the agenda without having, filling a card? Could I, yes, I have a comment.
I've never seen anybody turn down.
Okay.
Yeah, the form's more like on this one to prepare, like I saw the public comment thing, and so I didn't have to necessarily give an answer, but I like knowing that he was coming. The other thing on the public comments is if they request to participate electronically for whatever reason, we have to know that and send them an invite. Because it's not open.
It'd be nice if they did, but I'm just, you know, if somebody just walked in and wanted to make a comment.
You know, part of the key in that is managing it, and you'll notice the 3-minute time limit. We don't have the population that Salt Lake would, but I mean, their last public comment period on mask mandates went well into the evening. They finally had to just cut it off and said, we're moving on.
One thing it's not, we learned that in the training, is it's not everyone's opportunity to come and cast a vote on an issue, right? Or go back and forth. It's just make your comment. And even in a public hearing, I just want to be heard. I want to make sure you understand, you know, here's my issues. So up or down, it's public safety, it's budget, it's like, I don't want my tax dollars spent, whatever the public comment is, it's really good feedback, but without the processes and having the formal, this is just how you do it. And you're here to watch the government do its business. A lot of the ones that you'll see that go out of hand and stuff like that is really the way that the perception is I'm coming. If they're coming, I'm coming, and I'm going to get the last word, and I'm going to make multiple comments, and we're really voting on an issue instead of saying your piece and letting the representatives work through that, like that you've been elected to do. So we haven't really had, tons of those, and not that we want to be closed off, but I'm saying there's that other side too, where you solicit so much comment, you're given the perception that
Yeah, more comments on this side,
or
way more than this.
who got to
side.
talk more than someone else.
But the mayor can control that a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Correct? I mean, he has the ability to.
Well, and I was just thinking, if you have enough comment, like you said, on one side or the other, then we can make a decision to send it back to the planning commission, correct?
You could.
Mhm.
I mean, if you have.
Or-
a lot
Or
for-
table it and say, I'm gonna talk to some
We've
people off-
tabled them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've tabled
okay.
them, and
Left them
that kind of is
which means it's open still. And
it's open, and then there's still, we've tabled it a lot.
Yeah, okay.
Then it kind of gives us a chance to kind of step back for a minute.
And have a
And
work
that's-
session
And that's one good way to handle it.
okay.
I think on one hand, we want to do business, but on the other hand, I feel the times that we have tabled something allowed good time to reassess. And I know in my own case, it changed my attitude versus a nay to an aye or vice versa.
Okay, is there any more discussion?
I'm just impressed that he changed his attitude. I changed my opinion, but I've never changed my attitude.
Let me have an opinion.
I'd like to make a little bit of I wrote adjourn meeting after the work meeting, but I should have just closed the meeting. So my note's correct now, but the one thing I'm really happy about is I haven't called anybody from the dead.
I haven't seen George Francis.
No, I haven't. So I feel like that's a big improvement.
You may
My
try.
nerves, are a little bit calmer.
Yeah, you've made a lot of progress. There's,
Thank Denise for working me through some of these things.
yeah, good job.
Uh,
So I am prepared to make a motion, Mayor.
Tony,
I make a motion that we go into the closed session for discussion of purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
Second.
Tony made a motion to go to the next closed session, and it was seconded by Eric. And Denise, you need a couple of minutes to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?